Hi, my name is Cindy Oslin, and I wanted to talk to you this evening about making tube food for your G-tube fed loved one. And I'm going to tell you about making food by dehydrating it. So that's a little bit different. The blended food out there that a lot of people are doing is wonderful, but with my daughter's lifestyle, it's just an impossible thing for our family to do. So I make dehydrated G-tube food for my granddaughter Danielle. She battles a rare sodium channel defect and mitochondrial disease, and she's been tube fed for the last 2 years. She's 8.5 years old at this time, and so I always made her regular food in the food processor and was devastated when she could no longer eat by mouth. So she went on some of the regular commercial formulas like a lot of people who are watching this video are doing, and there's a lot of, junk in those, and I was devastated. So I kept trying to make blended foods, freezing them, and then when they thaw out they'd be clumpy or like just not the right consistency for the tube, and nothing worked with the infinity pump that she has. And so I kept searching, and about 7 months ago I wound up taking a dehydrated food class through my Ladies Homestead group, and it was really more for food for the future, and but in it I just felt, after making a fruit roll-up, thought, well, why not make all kinds of food in that fruit roll-up? And by the grace of God, I was able to do it. I make my fruit roll-up with all kinds of food and dehydrate it to the point where it's crisp, and then I can grind it in a grinder. And I'll show you a comprehensive meal that I make for Danielle. About once a month I make a huge batch of sweet potatoes, just boiled sweet potatoes. I don't bake it because I don't want it to have too much concentrated sugar. So just boiled sweet potatoes. The other thing I do is I throw butternut squash that I wash really well in pressure cooker. And the pressure cooker cooks like 4 large ones in like 20 minutes. And so those are things that I make, and then I freeze those in these jars. Now, you don't have to go out and buy all these jars. I happen to have them because I used to use them when I made Danielle's food by mouth. But I have these. This is sweet potato. Right here is 1 cup and 1 cup. And for my first recipe is 1.5 cups of sweet potato. Here's the butternut squash in 1 cup servings. Again, just pressure cooked butternut squash. Both of those ingredients are organic. I'm very big on trying to make sure that my granddaughter's food is as close to the way God created our food as possible. So I'm really all about non-GMO and organic food as much as I can. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell you I have an Excalibur dehydrator. And if you're saying, oh, I can't do that, I don't have one of those, you do not have to start off with that. I would recommend that you get this if this works out for you and you think this is something you'd be interested in. But to start off, you can use one of those inexpensive little dehydrators, but you just have to line those circle trays with parchment paper. Please use unbleached parchment paper, the brown type. We don't need to be adding chlorine to our food. If you don't have one of those, this will do. Here's just a cookie sheet and then brown parchment paper, unbleached parchment paper. If you're going to go this route, you need to try to get your oven temperature down as low as you can. If you're blessed enough to have an oven that gets down to 125 degrees or 135, that would be great. But most of us don't, and mine only gets down to 170. So if I do have to go this route, if I did have to, I would set my oven on 170 degrees and I would just open the door. And then I would let it cook. In order to achieve the crispness I need to grind the food, this recipe needs to dehydrate about 10 hours. So I do it at night, go to bed, and it's ready to grind in the morning. I usually dehydrate food maybe twice a week, and then once a month I make my big batches of butternut squash and sweet potato. This is not the only recipe I do, but this is a complete meal. When I'm done making this recipe for you, then you'll see this is going to be 205 calories per 8-ounce serving. And then when you add oil to it, you're going to achieve your 240 to 245 calories, which is the equivalent of the commercial formulas that are on the market. Like I said, I have an Excalibur dehydrator. I actually have two. So I make usually 10 to 15 bags at a time, or servings, or meals when I make them. So I have my Excalibur tray that it came with, and I invested in these Paraflex sheets. Down the road, if you decide that you are going to do this, I highly recommend these sheets. I just go ahead, blend my stuff, pour it on here. You have to get it somewhere around 1/8 to 1/4 inch thick. It dehydrates in a round circle like a fruit roll-up, although there's going to be all kinds of food in it, and it dehydrates for 10 hours. And you'll be able to test for doneness, and we'll talk about that tomorrow morning when I go ahead and take them out. So now we're going to go ahead and make our food. Again, 1.5 cups of sweet potato, organic, for this one. I'm going to be making more after this video, so that's why I have extra out. There's 1.5 cups. And before I add the butternut squash, I'm going to go ahead and do my liquid. This is organic oat milk that I have found. Wonderful product here. I'm going to use 1.5 cups of it in here. I also am going to put some coconut milk in here. Now, I'll be honest with you, I want to use shelf-stable products because then I feel really good about that as far as the milks go. I want to use the shelf-stable. So now I'm going to put 1/2 cup of coconut milk in there. Coconut milk is an awesome thing, but one thing that you need to know about dehydrating food is that fat is what spoils dehydrated food. So the higher the fat content, the quicker that your food is going to become bad. So I only use a little bit of that in it. I will be adding oil to this recipe, but it will be once we're ready to feed it to our loved one. So again, we did the 1.5 cups of oat milk, 1/2 cup coconut milk. I'm doing 1 cup of applesauce. When I'm done, this recipe is going to make 5.5 meals. And my granddaughter is blessed that she can still eat a little bit. So we do give her like the half by mouth. But also, like, I usually will make 10 to 15 bags or 2 to 3 recipes at a time. So then I will use that up and have an extra bag if I make 2. Okay, I also either use cranberry sauce because she's prone to UTIs, or I use an apricot jelly. And the reason I do this is because I like the pectin in it. Pectin is a soluble fiber, and my granddaughter needs a little help in that area with going to the bathroom. It's a great detoxer, and also because she is able to eat a little bit by mouth, it tastes good. It makes this whole recipe taste good too. So I use this or this, and it's 3 tablespoons. If I can get it open. And, okay, so 3 tablespoons, and please, please use an organic jelly. Again, as many organic and non-GMO foods as you possibly can use. Okay. Now the other thing I put in here is 3/4 of a cup of kale. And I use organic frozen kale. Okay, the reason I also cook it slightly. The reason I do that is because my granddaughter has a really sensitive GI tract. I need to cook it a little bit. If your loved one doesn't have that kind of a problem, please feel free to just go ahead and rinse it and use it. Because the less cooking involved in our food, the more nutrients are stable. That's a reason why I'm really not a big fan of canning food, because you have to cook that at such a high temperature, it destroys the really good nutrients that are in that. So, but for my granddaughter, I have to cook this slightly. So I go ahead, this is 3/4 of a cup of organic kale. All right, I'm ready to go ahead and put in my butternut squash, 1 cup of butternut squash. I'm going to read the recipe when I'm done again. 1 cup of butternut squash. And then the final thing that I'm going to put in is a 1/2 cup of baby organic, non-GMO or non-genetically engineered rice cereal. The reason I use baby rice cereal is, one reason is because my granddaughter really can't take vitamins, and this has some vitamins in it. And I do feel pretty good about this company being no genetically engineered ingredients, and it's organic. This is also a lot easier for her to digest. If your loved one doesn't need to do this, feel free to use oatmeal, feel free to use rice, just cook that first. And because you're going to have to get it to a consistency where it grinds down to powder and can go through the tube. If you bolus feed only, then you know you can have it a little bit more texture. But if you're using an infinity pump or one of the G2 pumps out there, you've got to get that fine powder, and this works beautifully for that. So it's a 1/2 cup in there. And I just kind of sprinkle it in. And dump it in. All right. Now that is really everything that's in this recipe, and if you're wondering where the protein is, it's actually right here. But this is such a fine powder, I add this after it's dehydrated, while I'm grinding. Again, this is a non-GMO pea protein, and this blends, it's beautiful for a pump or for bolus feeding. It's just this nice silky powder. And I'll show it to you tomorrow.